This is Bob Oliphant from the Westford Historical Society and Museum, bringing you episode 30 of season 4 of the Westford Wardsman podcast. The Westford Wardsman newspaper was part of Turner's Public Spirit, a weekly newspaper in Ayer a century ago. In this episode, we'll be reading the Wardsman for the week ending Saturday, July 29th, 1911, and I'll elaborate on what was happening in Westford that week. The week starts with the Westford Center section. Mrs. John R. Draper is at her mother's cottage at Martha's Vineyard. Miss Lillian is spending a month with college friends at Toledo, Ohio, and John is at Mount Vernon, New Hampshire. Mr. John Wright and daughters Frances and Alice are at South Royalston, Vermont. Miss Mary J. Davis is visiting at Mrs. John Warren Day's. Miss Edith A. Wright has gone to Covington, Virginia for the remainder of the long vacation to visit her sister, Mrs. Clara Wright Anderson. Mrs. Anderson was the wife of Reverend William E. Anderson, who served as pastor of the Methodist Church at Graniteville at the time of his marriage to Miss Wright in 1907. I think she is the only Westford girl who married one of the many pastors at the Methodist Church, who were mostly seminary students at Boston University, which was a Methodist college, and had a Methodist Department of Theology. Miss Mary Moran is enjoying the possession of a new automobile. What was formerly a carriage house on her premises makes a most convenient garage after being moved to a more favorable location. Many former carriage houses were converted to garage in the early 20th century. Miss Beatrice Sutherland is spending the summer vacation at the home of her aunt, Mrs. Lewis Marden, née Lillian Cass, in Woburn. Mrs. Edward Fisher has been spending the week at camp at Ford's Pond. The attendance was not up to average last Sunday at the Congregational Church, but those present heard a good sermon by Mr. Wallace on the 23rd Psalm. In the evening, Houghton Osgood conducted a well-sustained service with, quote, lessons from our dumb animals, end quote, as the topic. Mrs. Wallace and daughters and her sister, Mrs. Tarleton, and son remained at Swampscott for another week, and Mr. Wallace joined them for the greater part of the week. Since the welcome rain earlier in the week, the Whitney Park has been a pleasant spot. During the pleasant afternoons, the click of the croquet balls has gone merrily on, and some more or less scientific games have been played by the members of the new croquet club. Of course, the sets of tennis on the nearby court have all been of the skillful variety. A telephone has been installed in the library and promises to be very useful. The number is 41-2. Those who live, I believe that means it's the 41st phone that's on line 2 in town. Those who live at a distance, who wish for books on specific subjects or need to have reference work done, can often save some delay by sending a message in advance so that books may be ready for them. It will not always be possible for the librarian to answer promptly at the hours when many are waiting at the desk, and it will be appreciated if the telephone is not used at mail time in the evening and at the time of closing school. If possible, please avoid calling the library between 2:30 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon and 7:30 and 8 o'clock in the evening. Mrs. Mary E. Fletcher's many friends are glad she is feeling somewhat stronger than last week. Mrs. Harry Jakes, Jaqes, and daughter Dorothy, who have been spending the month of July at William Sutherland's, have returned to their home in Malden, and from there go for the month of August to Crystal Lake near Haverhill, where they have rented a camp. In the early dawn on Thursday morning, people were awakened by the steady ringing of the Unitarian church bell. Not a telephone sounded, but as the church bell was the time-honored custom of summoning help, some of the good firefighters assembled to do their part. Everything was very quiet aside from the bell ringing, and nobody could find where the fire was. It was finally decided that the steady old church bell went on a sort of rampage of its own, and instead of striking 3 strokes, struck 300. Books, the next section is a list of books added to the library. The only one that I recognized was by Walter Camp. It's called A Book of Football. The next is the About Town section. The Chelmsford Brass Band will entertain with music all who are entertainable next Wednesday evening at the Village Green at West Chelmsford. This band has stirring music and knows how to stir it. Everybody is welcome, afoot or horseback, auto or airship, electricity or steam. Come and get a stir and stir someone else, and everybody will get a contagious stir from the music. West Chelmsford Sunday School and those who hold friendly relations with it contributed 100 persons towards holiday enjoyments at Willowdale on Wednesday. They went by special electric trolley car. Mrs. Bernhardt and two daughters, Catherine and Vesta of New York, are guests at the prosperous Grieg farm, where groweth the luscious red strawberry, and not the red leaf and the overladen raspberry and blackberry cane, which makes you query, why thus and still no rain? The Grieg farm was what I remembered as the Hicks farm that's located right across Main Street from Fairview Cemetery. Reverend Seth Walker, the California evangelist of Westford Raising, is holding revival meetings of the Second Advent interpretation at Wakefield. He is of the old Stony Brook School training along the last of its existence under the old independent school district system. He has not forgotten the power of language as exemplified by his early teachers. He is assisted in his labors at Wakefield by J.B. Hall. James A. Ryan, who perished in the Porcupine Fire in Canada, left a wife. Her name was Jenny Trull, to whom he had been married only about a year. She will be remembered as the daughter of Arthur Trull, Trull, formerly of Westford Center. The funeral took place in Lowell. Reverend Frank Algier of the Pawtucket Church conducted the services. The bearers were relatives of Mrs. Ryan, Frank, Charles, and Elmer Trull, and S.A. Holden. Burial was in the Edson Cemetery. The Porcupine Fire in Canada that's mentioned here was one of the most devastating ever in Ontario. An abnormally hot, dry spell, as they were having in New England, created ideal conditions for the fire, in which a number of smaller fires converged into a giant conflagration. The town of Porcupine was the site of a huge gold discovery in 1907. On July 11th, 1911, when the Porcupine Gold Rush was at its height, a gale from the southwest whipped some small brush fires into flames. As the fire gained strength, it engulfed the tender dry forest, razing everything in its path. It laid waste to over 494,000 acres of forest and killed at least 70 people. You can look it up on the internet for more information. It's the Porcupine Fire in Ontario, Canada, 1911. Charles W. Whitney on the Lowell Road, the busy man, has added busy to busy and harvesting all the hay in the John Decatur farm. Reverend J.D. Sallee of Hanover and Boston is playing the lawn tennis court at the old Oaken Bucket farm. He knows how to preach and play and not go astray. The Westford AA play the Handcar AA of Leominster today. AA is Athletic Association, and they're talking about baseball. The Westford team is going to Leominster by electric car. The peat fire in the swamp of Mrs. Sarah Drew is still doing business, and neither the spray pump of the town nor the spray pump of the clouds last Monday have been able to induce it to quit business. Academy High School teacher Dexter Cogshaw and Leon Hildreth played lawn tennis on Wednesday afternoon at Whitney Park against Martin Seavey and John Taylor. The Seavey crowd won by 1 and several reserves for next count. Miss Amy Schellinger of nearby larger Boston and others from smaller Bostons are tramping indoors and out of the old Oaken Bucket farm. The old bucket is nearly full. Miss Pinder of Lowell has made an hour and 5 minutes visit at the Sunset Farm of John Haley on Francis Hill, close to the shadow of Stony Brook School. Miss Pinder is a niece of Colonel Albert Pinder of Lowell. The following expressive sentiment of the late Mrs. Elizabeth Scott Wilson, written by a friend, was received too late at the time of her obituary notice. It's a brief quatrain. We miss thee from our home, dear mother. We miss thee from our care. We miss thy We miss thy fond and loving smile. We miss thee everywhere. Next section is titled A Fatal Accident. A fatal accident occurred on Oak Hill last week Friday at the stone quarry of Perkins and Colson. A large boulder was being undermined by Mr. Hilbert Colson with the intention of turning it over. Evidently, there was miscalculation in regard to the depth of the stone in the ground where the dirt had not been removed, for without warning it gave a lurch and buried Mr. Colson beneath it, killing him instantly. The stone was estimated to weigh 6 tons. Mr. Colson will be remembered by Graniteville people as living in the village a few years ago, being employed as a blacksmith and tool sharpener for various stone quarries. He leaves a widow and 1 brother. The funeral was held on Sunday afternoon from the undertaking rooms of the J.B. Courier Company, Lowell. Reverend H.C. Moe, M.O.E., of North Chelmsford conducted the services. Burial was in Abington. Next paragraph is on burglaries. A sunlight housebreaking was enacted sometime last Saturday forenoon at the new cottage residence of Edmund Whitney on the Lowell Road, about 1/4 of a mile west of Brookside. A gold watch and suit of clothes were taken, and everything else scattered about in a very impolite manner. Mr. Whitney had just moved into his new home, and he is very much dissatisfied with this kind of housewarming. The family were absent at the time, and it is evident that someone well-stocked in cowardly courage was well informed of what the house contained. No chance housebreaker would ever have selected this unfinished 2-room cottage for gold watches. Following this, the Westford station was entered unlawfully on Saturday evening. The telephone machinery was badly disarranged in an attempt to get at the money, which amounted to a small contribution. Some tobacco and cigarettes were added to the assets of the unwanted visitor. This is the second time this station has been made to contribute in a small way to a very small way of getting a living within 2 months. Graniteville Station was entered same evening, same system. The next section is the Graniteville section. Mr. and Mrs. John Quinn of Lawrence have been recent guests of Mr. and Mrs. Frank L. Furbush of this village. Mr. and Mrs. Willard H. Beebe left here this week for Liverpool, Nova Scotia, where they will spend the next few weeks. Mrs. P.H. Clark and niece, Miss Polly Shea of Worcester, have been recent guests of Mrs. Hannah E. Harrington. She was the widow of Daniel Harrington, who died in 1909. The next section is called Baseball. The Graniteville Baseball Club visited Lowell on Saturday and defeated the strong Pawtucket Blues by the decisive score of 10-0. The Lowell boys got men on bases at various stages of the game, but fast work by the Graniteville team kept them from scoring. Not a run was made for 5 innings until Graniteville put one across, and this one served to put their opponents in the air. For the next 9 runs were made in the following 4 innings. Jack Spinner of the Graniteville Club pitched a great game, and aside from shutting the opposing club out, he had 13 strikeouts to his credit. He was ably supported behind the bat by his brother, Dick, while the whole team put up a fast fielding game and batted well, as the score shows. In today's game, the local club plays in West Chelmsford. Next section is on St. Catherine's Church. and St. Catherine's Church on Sunday morning, 2 masses were celebrated by the pastor, Reverend Edmund Schofield, both of which were largely attended. Reverend Schofield announced that all the bills for the carpenter work on the church has been paid, and all that remained were a few bills of minor importance that they were ready to settle for at any time, as they had the ready money at hand. Reverend Schofield was profuse in his thanks for the generosity of the Abbott-Worsted Company, who have already contributed the sum of $1,000 to the building fund. Their kindness is greatly appreciated by the parishioners of St. Catherine's Church. Gifts recently received to be used at the services in the church were a beautiful set of vestments given by the Splain family of Forge Village in memory of Patrick, Daniel, and John Splain. Also an altar cloth trimmed with handmade lace given by John Quinn of Lawrence. The Abbott-Worsted Company was also quite charitable to the Methodist Church in Graniteville, and provided financial aid to the church when it was built in 1869. And also Charles Sargent's daughter, Harriet, married the first minister of the Methodist Church, Reverend Minor. Next, we have the Forge Village section. Reverend Leon Field of Fitchburg officiated at the services held at St. Andrew's Mission on last Sunday afternoon. Mr. Fisher will conduct the services, which are to be held at the mission tomorrow at the usual hour. Frederick Naylor of this village was married to Miss Helena Kilmister of England at Boston on July 20th. Mr. and Mrs. Frederick Harrison of Lawrence spent the weekend at the home of Mrs. Oldham of Pond Street. Miss Marion Blodgett is spending the week in Worcester. Miss Elizabeth Northrop of Pepperell is visiting at the home of Mr. and Mrs. Fenimore Morton. Miss Clara Chappell and her and her aunt, Mrs. George Jackson, spent Thursday at Old Orchard Beach, Maine. William D. Hanley of Marlborough is recuperating at the home of his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Daniel Hanley, after his serious illness. Mrs. Albert B. Jones of Worcester, together with Miss Ethel Jones, also of Worcester, are visiting relatives and friends in this village and Groton. The Mrs. Clara Chappell, Elizabeth Spinner, and Gladys Daly visited Revere Beach last Saturday and spent a most enjoyable day. The annual field day of the Westford Fire Department will be held in this village on Saturday, August 5th. The 3 hose companies of Forge, Graniteville, and Westford will compete for the Silver Cup, which was won by the John Edwards Hose Company last year. Besides a fine list of sports, a banquet and dance will be held in Abbott Hall in the evening. Miss Helen Lord has been visiting at the home of her parents, Mr. and Mrs. David Lord, for the past couple of months, has returned to Lowell. Mrs. H.E. Randall entertained Walter Bennett and 3 children of West Townsend the past week. Edwin Cherry has returned to New York after a most enjoyable visit of 2 weeks with his grandmother, Mrs. M.A. Lowther. Her maiden name was Mary Ann Adams, and she was the widow of Patrick Lowther, who died in 1891. Mr. Cherry has passed his final examinations for a trained nurse at the Long Island Hospital in Long Island, New York. James Berry of Lawrence and family, also Garfield Berry, his brother, are spending the month at Mr. Holt's cottage. Miss Caroline Precious is spending the week visiting relatives in Townsend. The Abbott-Worsted Company closed their mills Saturday for a week during repairs. That's the news in Westford for the week ending July 29th, 1911. Thank you for listening, and thanks to Ryan Cousins of WestfordCAT for providing technical support. You can find transcriptions and podcasts from the Wardsman at our website at museum.westford.org. or visit the Historical Society's Facebook page for more Westford news from days gone by. This is Bob Oliphant, and I hope you will join us for next week's Westford Wardsman podcast. Thank you.